Hey everyone, welcome to the EverydayFI podcast, the show that explores the lives and stories of everyday people in the financial independence community. So last week we got to talk to Doug, and our conversation went on for so long that I decided to split it up into two parts. This is part two, and we dive even deeper into Doug's awesome story. So tune in right after these messages. A lot of the people that I've interviewed on here who are financially independent and have stopped working are like, I don't know how the heck I fit a job into my life. Like, I am so busy. And because you will find things to do. Like you said, you surf all day. I'm thinking about my partner who backpacks and climbs, and he's on a sabbatical right now. And that's what he does. He does it all the time. And if he could do it more, he can't do it every single day because it is physically taxing, and he has to be a little bit careful with that because with climbing it's very physically, you can get injured in your hands, and he has to just watch out for that. But there's still other things he can do. There's a climbing coalition that he joined as a volunteer and does photography for them, and he's able to fill his days. And he actually just interviewed at REI today just to bring in some money because he's on sabbatical, but he's not financially independent. So he's like, I want to bring some money in, and I will go back to my career, but I don't want to pick a role that I really don't like. I want to take my time, but I do realize that I need money. So REI, perfect, because he's a climber and stuff.
You're being very polite about that, about him working for some money, but you and I both know that the only reason he's there is for the employee discount and the free gear.
Yes, that too. Well, the cool thing is REI also gives you benefits. So they're one of those employers that as a part-timer, you can get benefits. Now, I don't know how good they are, but they provide health insurance and stuff. So that's another reason I like this going. But yes, also the discount. Definitely part of it. And he's like, I want to talk to people about climbing all day. That sounds like fun. I hope that's what it is for him.
I will say that before people retire, before people leave their jobs, and that 6 months to a year before they make that transition, they struggle to think about what they're going to do all day. It's very intimidating when you're working. It's very difficult to imagine what it's going to be like when you don't have to show up for work. I understand that part. I'll go on and say, though, that 6 months after they've stopped working and they've started their new lives and they've put a little thought into what they want to do all day, they suddenly can't imagine, as you said, when they found the time to go to work, and they don't understand why they were so worried about what they were going to do in retirement. And I'm here to vouch that it's not that you find things to do all day. It's that you have to limit yourself to the number of things you choose to do all day. And you will still be responsible for managing your time, but you're still going to suck at it. And you're still going to make choices that seem perfectly logical at the time. And then a week later, realize you just committed yourself to another 45-hour work week, but it's all your fault. You're the one who volunteered for this, who decided to do that, to start this third project, to go out with the family to do this fourth thing. And before you know it, you're exhausted, you're overwhelmed, you're overcommitted. And the real challenge, if you've made a thoughtful transition from working to retirement, the real challenge is making sure that you focus on the things that are important to you and focus on getting those things done. Probably need to get it done early in the day before everybody else starts interfering with your time or demanding your attention. And that way that you make sure that you get the important things checked off your personal standards, your personal list, before the rest of the day happens. You still have things you have to do, right? You still got to chop wood, carry water, do chores, clean things. But those few hours of the morning that you get on your own, or those few hours in the evening after everybody else has left you alone, they're very precious. And I do not like having my time wasted by bureaucracy or administration or other red tape.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it sounds like you've learned quite a bit from your 22 years of being FI'd, I guess. And I'd love to learn more. So it sounds like in the beginning, maybe you struggled a little bit with trying to figure out what to do every day, except that you surfed. But I'd love to know what you learned in the beginning, how it changed over time, and how it's going now. Oh, and when did you quit your job? When were you done with traditional working?
It's fortunate in the military that you get a piece of paper that tells you you're retired. And for me, that was 1 June 2002. And so that's it. I'm retired. I've got a certificate. I've got something signed by the president that I can hang in the wall and tell everybody else I really am retired. What that meant, though, was that I had spent months beforehand making up a list of things I wanted to do once I retired. Most of them were chores, home improvement things, fixing things that I'd gotten behind on. But the top 3 things on the list were be a better spouse, be a better parent, and get more in shape. And so the first thing that happens when you retire from the military, and it probably happens from a traditional career as well, you take a lot of naps. You're chronically fatigued. You've burned yourself out, and you're just going to sit around and stare at the walls and take naps. And eventually, about a month or two later, you have recovered from that chronic fatigue. But during that time, you've had time for reflection. You've had time to go for long walks or to build a sustainable exercise program. You could exercise for the sake of improving your health and being able to surf for a couple hours, but you no longer had to exercise for some artificial goal like a marathon. It was up to you what your goals were and how sustainable or what your deadlines were going to become. You could learn to slow down and take life at a much more measured pace. One thing that everybody does when they stop work, no exceptions, everybody does this, is they go back and they start their budgeting from a zero baseline all the way up to the very end of their expenses. And it's because you're retired. And so you call up all the insurance companies and say, I'm retired now. Can I get a discount? You renegotiate all your utilities, especially the cable bill, the internet bill. You renegotiate everything that you've been spending money on. Maybe you outsource a lot of your life. Maybe you let the yard service go. Maybe you cancel your gym membership and start doing more of your workouts at home. Maybe you stop buying so much convenience food and do more cooking. You're going to experiment with all those things. And then later on, you're probably going to outsource them again. One of the worst offenders in that regard, we outsource our house cleaning. Of course, we try not to get the house dirty in the first place. But we do not outsource all of our yard work, but we do a lot of it while the house cleaner is in our house cleaning, because we know we can find a house cleaner. We can't find somebody to do yard work around here easily. We do a lot of our own repairs because we enjoy that. We do a lot of our own home improvement because we enjoy that. But when we still are doing a major project, we'll still hire a contractor. We'll still go with professionals. And those are things that you experiment with for the first couple of years. And in retrospect, when June 1, 2002 was close to the bottom of the internet recession, and it was after 9/11. And we were a little tight on the purse strings because we weren't sure if the stock market really was going to go to zero back then. It seemed pretty likely to happen in 2003. But of course, eventually the economy recovers. And today I regret being so tight on the purse strings, but that was a natural reaction to retiring during a recession.
I want to get a sense of where you were in your family. How old were you? How old was your wife? How old was your daughter? And where were you all in your life at that time?
Right at that point, I was 41 years old. My spouse is a year behind me, and our daughter was 9.5 years old. And so that's another thing. You retire from work, but you're still fairly tied to a schedule. You're tied to the family schedule, whatever that is. Your kid's still going to school every day, and you're finding things to do, but you're generally working around the school calendar, and you're taking trips when all the other families take trips. Even though you could take a trip anytime you want, your kid that's in school might not want to be that kid that took 3 months off from school to go to Europe, right? And that's okay when you're 5 or 6 or 7 years old. But when you're 9 or 10, verging on teenagerhood, dropping out of school to go travel Europe with your parents, that's just embarrassing. And that doesn't make any sense at all at that age. So that's where we were at that point. And of course, as the years go by, we settled into our lifestyle, dialed in. That's the other thing that happens after you do that zero-based budget is you figure out what's important to you. That's maybe why you go back and hire the house cleaner later on. That's maybe why you start going out to dinner a couple more times a week, is because you found that balance in your life of things you really enjoy doing and things you'd rather outsource. Now that you have the time, you know what you want to outsource. And so as you go by, you relax and you get into a new routine. Part of that was considering job offers. I started getting job offers about 3-4 months after I retired. This is all from the contact network. I retired even before LinkedIn had started. And yet I still had a contact network that knew that I was retired and said, okay, it's been 6 months. He should be bored by now. Let me call him up and see what he wants to do. And of course, I was still spending time with family, still figuring out what I want to do when I grow up. I spent a lot of time on internet forums back then, posting about personal finance, financial independence. One of the earliest forums back then is called EverydayFI.org. It's still with us. I would post on there asking what I could do, how the lifestyle was, what was I missing? And the answer is, no, you're doing fine. And as we discussed those things, it became evident that another guy on the forum was writing a book about financial independence. And he did. He published it, and everything worked out well. And as we watched that going on, we said, well, if Bob Clyott could write a book on financial independence, it's called Work Less, Live More. And if he could write that from the help of all of us on earlyretirement.org, well, gosh, the military people have pensions, they have veterans disability compensation, they have cheap health care. They've solved a lot of the problems of financial independence. There should be a book for military people. And I said, well, I can write that. And I did. I wrote that from the help of the 50 or 60 veterans and service members we had on the forum at that time. And I would write up a sample chapter from an outline that we had generated, and I'd put that chapter on a web page, and everybody would critique it and offer their thoughts. And it took about 5 years, but we had a full book. And then I finally found a publisher, and we published it. And that started it. But that's The Military Guide to Financial Independence and Retirement. And that one came out in 2011. And then 7 years later, I'll mention the second book here. Please go find these books at your library. That's what the library is for. You don't want to buy the book until after you've tried it. So go see the library and get the book there. And if you like it, feel free to buy it, but you don't have to. The second book was when our daughter was getting to the end of her 5-year obligation, and she was thinking about getting out of the Navy. She wasn't sure. And I was going to financial meetups like Camp FI and FinCon and other conferences where we talk about personal finance. And I found out that in 2016, 2017, people had stopped asking questions about how to reach financial independence. It's all out there. There's a million blogs about it. It's on the internet. There's calculators. It's automated. It's a lot easier than it was in the 1990s. And so people were asking me, what am I going to do all day? That question was still there. But the other question was, how do I raise my kids so that they understand financial independence? And to me, the answer was fairly straightforward. Well, you achieve financial independence when your kid is young enough to have to watch what you do. And eventually they say, geez, their lifestyle looks awesome. Even though they're my lame parents, they're financially independent. And I want to be like that someday. And because they're my parents, I know I can reach financial independence years before them because I'm a lot smarter. So that was the answer. But of course, that wasn't good enough. And people wanted to know details. And finally, one night we were visiting, my wife and I were visiting Carol and her spouse, and we were all sitting around the dinner table. And I said, Carol, I was at the conference last week, and I got that question again about how did we raise a financially savvy kid? How did we raise somebody for financial independence? And I tapped into either a very deep vein of resentment or she had ideas. I'm not sure which. There's a lot of therapy going on that night. And about 10 minutes into the discussion, I look over at my spouse, and she's making that little motion with her fingers in the air. And what that means is you better be writing some of this down. And my daughter, went back to her military transition class that she was attending, the one that they teach you how to get out of the Navy. And instead of learning about her veterans benefits, or instead of learning about how to get a real job, she was back there writing the outline of what became our second book. And that's Raising Your Money Savvy Family for Next Generation Financial Independence. And we actually had to do some research because, again, there are a million of those books you would think, but it's not quite like that. What we had that was different was that we had the money stories from me, the parent. We had the money stories as she felt at the time it happened to her as 5 or 6 or 10 or 15 years old. And then we had the perspective as her as an adult, having to go out and earn her own way, having to raise her own family. And so I just was there to set up all the stories. And then she would give her reaction at the age she was. And then she would talk about what wisdom she perceived in arrears looking back on all those years, and how she was going to raise her daughter differently. And that turned out to be unique. That's why we did it with Choose FI, is because they have a very large family audience, right? Over 1 million people. And we knew that would resonate. So I've been finding one thing or another to write about, either on forums or on a blog or on the next book outline or something, for 22 years now. I'm working on my third book, which is just going to do what everybody else has already told me they want to know. I understand how to get financial independence. I understand how to do my kids now. What I want to know is what the rest of my life looks like. And so I'm going to write about life after financial independence. Of course, being financially independent and in control of my own time, this book goes very slowly because I get to do what I want to do all day, and I lack focus. I'm writing a blog post or writing on a forum instead of necessarily writing a book chapter. So it goes more slowly than you might expect. But on the other hand, I'm having fun. I was worried about aging out of financial independence, right? If you're old enough for Social Security, do you really have any credibility to talk about the lifestyle of financial independence anymore? However, there's another personal finance author. His name is Paul Merriman, and he's probably pushing 80 by now. He published his latest book at age 77. So now I've got a deadline, right? I've got 13 years to pump out this book before I'm going to be as old as Paul Merriman. I think I can make that deadline, but I might have to narrow my focus a little bit and start working on book chapters instead of on blog posts.
Yeah, maybe. I actually wonder, I don't know how far into this book you are, but one curiosity I have is, what about bringing other people into the book, kind of like you brought your daughter in to get her perspective, like other people who have reached financial independence and how they're living their FI life, and maybe getting them in different stages, like people who just started, people who are in the middle, people who are your age. And then you get a lot of different perspectives and you can reach a lot of different people.
You're absolutely right. And that's what makes publishers drool and start writing you checks, is the fact that you have stories not just from you pontificating from your ivory tower, but stories of people who have been there and gone through it and shared the same backgrounds or the same challenges as the audience you're trying to reach. And you're trying to reach a very big audience. So one way you do that is you write about all the stories you've heard over the last 22 years, is these people are saving for financial independence. And you refer to your previous books, but you don't want to just regurgitate the old material and recycle it into a new book. These days, I'm spending the majority of my time on a forum, and it's a forum that you actually pay money to join. I'm not suggesting anybody would want to join this forum. It's called Millionaire Money Mentors. It's from the blogger who has the website esimoney.com. That's earn, save, and invest money.com. His name is John Nardini. And on that forum, you would think that of the 1,000 people in that forum, over 400 of whom are real no-fool and millionaires, and some are worth 9 figures, and a couple are worth 8 figures, and 7 figures is almost everybody has that net worth. Yeah, everybody. But they're joining that forum because they're willing to spend the money to join the forum. And it's because the conversations are completely different. There are no trolls. There are no spammers. There are no haters. We all have very healthy egos, and the discussions occasionally get a little intense in that regard because we're not used to having our thinking challenged by other egos that are at least as big as ours. And I include myself in that category. But we have very good discussions about life after financial independence. And you would think all these people can do math, all these people can earn money, all of them should know when they have assets of 25 times their annual spending for the 4% safe withdrawal rate. And they do know, but they don't have faith in it. They don't trust it. They don't think it's going to work. They can do the math, and all the math and logic is immediately trumped by the emotions of behavioral financial psychology, by fear. This $5 million got to last me for the rest of my life, and I'm only 50 years old. Well, yeah, there are other things that are going to run out before your money runs out, and it's difficult to communicate that. So I've learned a lot about that fear, that the behavioral financial psychology, the emotions of what keep you from jumping into the 4% safe withdrawal rate. And I can write about that and explain. There are a dozen stories right off the bat that I've already collected from the forum, with everybody's permission, of course. I say, I'm going to get a book out of this. And they're like, yeah, just don't use my real name. And these stories are actually very powerful because you begin to appreciate that when you have reached 25-year annual spending, like you're Pete Adney from Mr. Money Mustache, and you only need $625,000 for your lifestyle, and you're watching somebody with $5 million who is afraid to stop working, and you wonder what is wrong with both of you. What's wrong with them? What's wrong with you? This can't be that easy. Well, the answer is yes, it can. It's the emotions that are derailing the logic and the math.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've said this repeatedly on my podcast that you cannot dissociate money from emotions. Like we really want to, because, oh, money's numbers, money's math, and math is logical. And yes, true. But guess what? Humans are not logical. And humans are the ones who use the money to live the life they want. Money wouldn't exist without humans. So ergo, money is emotional.
Even worse than that, it's that we're accustomed to earning a paycheck.
Mm-hmm.
We've been doing it since we were teenagers. And it's terrifying to give up that paycheck and either have to make your own withdrawals, once a month, once a year, or put it in some kind of autopilot where you get your own paycheck every 2 weeks to make you feel like you're still able to spend some money. You give yourself permission to spend, but then you still worry about the lumpy expenses. And financial advisors, of course, they're all laughing right now because they've seen this thousands of times in their clients where they retire and they start spending money and they're still putting money aside for a rainy day. They're still saving because they think they're going to have to replace a car next year, or that roof is already 10 years old. They have enough money to write a check for that right now, but they still feel like they've got to revert to those old habits where you piled up that sinking fund for the next car, for the next roof, for the next appliance. Very hard to get out of those habits. I have a tremendous file directory on my hard drive of pictures of Dr. Spock from Star Trek because he is highly logical and he can do math, right? And he has lived long and he has prospered, and yet it's the emotions.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny because you said you were so used to getting a paycheck, but I'm like, okay, would I rather have $5 million of a nest egg and not be working and get cancer that I have to pay out of pocket for? Or would I rather not have that nest egg, be working, be getting a paycheck and get cancer? It's just because you have a job and you get a paycheck doesn't necessarily mean you're actually going to be able to cover all your expenses still.
Right.
You know what I mean? And especially if you're still early in your savings years. And relying on a company to keep you when I'm trying to phrase this in a way that's not totally ranting, but I'm a little bit pessimistic about the corporate world today because it feels like they really see their people as just cogs in a machine, and a cog can be replaced. I went through a layoff a little over a year ago, and it was one of those companies that had really high ratings, who touted how much they cared about their employees and what their employees thought. And every move they made was to make the employees happy. And then they did a round of layoffs and laid off 12% of the company. And now that might not sound like a lot, but it is a lot. Like, it was a company of over 1,000 people. So there was like over 100 people laid off, and I was one of them. And all of that stuff they had just said went up in the air. And it was because they had to make their shareholders happy. And that's who really matters to a lot of these public companies, I should say. And you really, even though you have a paycheck, it doesn't mean that you are secure. And I feel like having that $5 million nest egg is way more secure than having to be employed by a business that could go out of business. Yes. Or could lay you off. And that's not everybody. You were in the military, so obviously your situation is a little different. But anybody who's working in the corporate world, like, that's actually a pretty tenuous situation that you could be in, because
Right.
I don't care what company you're at. If they want to lay you off, they'll lay you off. If they need to cut expenses, the biggest expense that a company has is paying their people. If AI is going to come in and potentially do your job better than you can, and so that it's just, yeah, I don't know. I'm not trying to make people more afraid. What I'm trying to say is that the paycheck is not necessarily going to make your life more stable. It's that nest egg that's going to make it more stable.
I will say that every crisis that you experience in financial independence, everything that happens to family, to personal health, to relatives, to your neighborhood, every crime, every bad thing that happens in your life when you're financially independent. Now imagine that you're still trying to work a 40-hour work week with that same crisis going on. So financial independence, having control over your time, really does make everything better and gives you more time to respond to the true problems in life, the things that are really your priorities. And you don't have to worry about your love for the corporation being reciprocated by them during a tough economy.
Yep, I'm with you for sure. Okay, we've talked a lot about how you came to Find Fi, why you did it, all of that stuff, and what it looks like on the other side for you. And I want to ask you if there's any topics that you would like to share with the community. You mentioned before we recorded and we were setting up this interview that there were some topics that you were like, I'd really like to focus on these. And I'd like you to launch into some of those. I think one of them was how Camp Fi started, which I love Camp Fi. So what would you like to speak about when it comes to Camp Fi?
I was starting with Camp Mustache, and the problem was immediately that the Camp Mustache couldn't convene enough times during the year to handle all the people who wanted to go. And I think that's why Stephen got the idea for doing it all over the country. And other Camp Mustaches do exist in other parts of the country, but they tend to be pretty much the same local attendees every year. And Stephen's been doing Camp FI now, to where he not only can do one attendee and one session in every part of the country where he's had people through the year who want to attend, but also a second session as well for other people. And there are people that actually will travel the country going to Camp FI as part of their itinerary. And so I latched onto that early on, as it was one of the first Camp FIs in Florida in 2018. And from there, we changed lives that weekend. And there were people sitting in the audience who would sit there and say, wait a minute, 25 times annual spending? And then you see them on their phone, and 30 minutes later, they're like, why am I still working? And we talk about that. You know, we had people spend Sunday writing their resignation letter. We had people straightening out all their rental properties that they'd gotten involved in and not sure where they wanted to go. We had people figuring out their 401k. We just have solved a lot of problems through Camp FI, and I really enjoy that. Other financial conferences I've gone to, there have been a couple on the military side. One of them is the Mill MoneyCon t-shirt here. And that's mainly intended for financial advisors who are advising military clients, military families. Military Influencer Conference is one for military entrepreneurs, because if we have to work 80 hours a week in the military, then by gosh, when we get out of the military, we'd sure love to start our own business and work 80 hours a week for ourselves. And FinCon, Financial Conference, FinCon Expo, I've been going to FinCon for 12 years now. This will be my 12th one. And I always enjoy that. That's for content creators. We talk about where money and media meet, but what the real unofficial motto is: money, nerds, unite. All of those conferences, you find your tribe. And when you find your tribe, you form connections that last far longer than a conference. And I have people that I still talk with on the phone or on Zoom today, or even meet up with. In fact, I'm going to another meetup here in about an hour of people that I've met from global nomads, slow travel. And we all just get together and talk about what we happen to be doing right now. And this happens to be a group of people who are on a cruise ship traveling from the US that are ending up in Sydney, Australia next week. So this is their port call today in Honolulu. And so these are the things that I've tremendously grown to enjoy in financial independence, having these new opportunities to go out and learn more about money and to learn more about lifestyle and make sure I'm not overlooking any horrible mistakes. Moving it on to the next generation. Our granddaughter is 4 years old. I joke with my daughter that this time we're going to do it right, and we're going to raise her better than she was raised. But we find that's very important to us, is having the time that financial independence gives you to be involved in the things in your life that are important to you. And it turns out that when you have adult children who go out there and have kids, that grandparenting will sneak up on you. I'm sure there's a reason those kids are so cute when they're born, and that's to keep them alive. But it's also another generation removed of parenting. It's all the experience you had as a parent, and now you're confident and much more relaxed when you're grandparenting a young child growing up, and you're helping mentor them. I enjoy that tremendously.
Yeah, if my mom listens to this podcast, and she's 66, retired, and she definitely wants a grandkid. She doesn't have one yet.
I hear they're pretty affordable. You just go out there and buy them.
Grandkids. Yeah. It's funny because I have a really good friend, Ruthie, and her husband, Phil, who just had a baby. She's 3 months old, and they're around our age. And it's funny because my partner, Chris, and I actually don't have a whole lot of friends who have kids. I think it's just starting to be a little bit different for millennials. They're starting to wait a little bit longer to have kids. I'm also one of the older ones in our friend group at 37. But it's really cool to see our close friends have a child because we're learning a lot from them. And
Yes.
it's interesting to see, okay, so how does raising a family today look like, and how is it different from how we were raised? They both have remote positions, so they actually don't really have to have childcare. They can just take turns taking care of the baby when they're not in meetings and stuff like that. And it's really interesting. My mom is just like, when am I getting a grandkid? So what we've tried to do is have our friends Ruthie and Phil. So they're coming to Christmas with us, and we're going to have baby's first Christmas with my mom and them. And I'm like, okay, let's give her a little bit of something. This isn't her grandkid, but at least it's like a kid she can dote on a little. So
Good.
maybe the pressure is off us a little bit. But actually, I had a question. How involved are you in your granddaughter's early financial education? I know she's only 4 years old, though, so there's probably not a whole lot, but you said we're going to do it right this time. What does that look like as a grandparent versus your daughter as the parent?
Well, we practice tactics, what we call revenge parenting, is raising your kids better than you were raised. The other thing we're doing now is called revenge grandparenting. And I'm sorry to say that I wish that our daughter's grandparents had been more involved in her life than they actually were. We're going to fix that. And so they've transferred back to Oahu. He's active duty. He's got a job here with the Navy on Oahu. And they transferred here 6 months ago, and they're living right up the street from us. And it's a 10-minute walk away. So what that means is that every weekday, our granddaughter, 4 years old, almost 5 years old now, can come down and spend an hour with us after preschool. And admittedly, she's just had an exhausting day at preschool, and she doesn't like to nap anymore. So maybe we're not seeing her at her best. But she gets the chance to calm down, spin down, maybe have some time running around with us or running around with the neighbor kids. And we get to be involved with her life. And we have these routines that we've set up and these things that we do together. And that's what Grand Doug and Grand Marge do with our granddaughter. And there's also a babysitting once a week. Make sure your mother's involved in that. We call it reserve grandparenting, where you do one weekend a month or one babysitting a week, and maybe some vacation time during the summer. And so that's what our deal is. We usually babysit every week. And in exchange, we get invited over for Sunday dinner, and we usually get there about a half an hour before the evening routine starts with our granddaughter. So we're involved in that routine. That all that kids want is a predictable, stable family routine. That something that they can rely on or that they know is going to happen frequently, every day, every week, whatever the period is. But having that stability and that routine is very comforting to them. And it just helps us to get to know each other. We had a technique when we were raising Carol where we would take her somewhere, and if she behaved like at the grocery store, as a 4-year-old, she was allowed to have one special thing, but she had to choose it, and it had to be one special thing. Our granddaughter is at that level right now. The other day, her one special thing was something like a $125 plushie that she really thought would be very special indeed. Her mother pulled back the reins a little bit on that one. Usually one special thing now has a price tag of about $15 to $20 tops on it. And that's being negotiated. But the whole point is that now that our granddaughter is beginning to appreciate that some things in life are more expensive than others, she's ready for that allowance. And so pretty soon she's going to start getting an allowance. We know that by the time she's in kindergarten and has school supplies, that she will find things to spend money on, and that having an allowance of $4 or $5 a week will give her plenty of chances to make spending choices, mostly bad choices, but it teaches her to manage her money. If she loses her money, if she spends it frivolously, if the toy doesn't work out to what she thought, if she buys the cool thing that all the other cool kids have and it's not what she thought it was, those are all valuable, teachable moments. And this time we have a book. Carol and I and her mother, my spouse, we're all on the same page. Her spouse is also. And so there's going to be 4 of us who are all in the same money story. We're all financially independent. We all have this time, who are going to be focused on our 4. And I'm beginning to feel a little sorry for our granddaughter because she's got all these adults telling her how to do it right. But on the other hand, her journey is going to be completely different from the generational journeys that her parents or her grandparents have had. And we're looking forward to those challenges as they pop up. But we are involved in her life roughly, 7-8 hours a week right now. And I can see that is going to be continuing for the next 14 years. She's going to be the high school class of 2038 in mom's old schools. And so we're looking forward to it.
Yeah, that sounds really fun. And oddly, I was like, wow, I can't wait to be a grandparent. I don't even have a kid yet.
Grandparenting is a lot easier. If they have a poopy diaper, you just give them back.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. So I have 7 siblings and they're all a lot older than me. Yeah. And they all had kids, and their kids, it's a little funny. My family is very interesting, but their kids, I think my oldest niece nephew is almost my age. So I think he's 35, I'm 37. And so you can see there's like an age gap. So I've witnessed the raising of children in a certain way. And then on the other side of my family, I have a bunch of cousins who are all younger than me. I think the oldest of my cousin, who's closest to me, I was 12 when he was born. And so I changed a lot of poopy diapers because my sisters made me do it. My aunts and uncles on the other side of my family made me do it. So I actually know quite a bit about the technical aspects of raising a kid, how to bathe them, how to feed them, how to change the diapers, how to wipe correctly, what to use. And my partner knows nothing, absolutely nothing, because he has one sibling and he was never really involved in the kids. And so I'm really interested in that. I'm considering, like, should I teach him or should I just let him figure it out and see what happens?
I've got a better idea. I've got a better suggestion.
Oh, yeah.
There are parenting classes. And that's exactly what you're going to do. Right? You're going to send them to school. Well, you're going to go with them because you're going to enjoy watching him learn as you go. That puts the 2 of you on an equal footing because you both have the same skills you need to preserve this human and keep them alive. And that's the important part, is being able to do the job, share the jobs, share the chores evenly.
Yes, I agree. And it's one of those things where, okay, instead of me trying to teach you, and now that I know there's parenting classes, that's great. But I was telling him, I'm going to make you Google it because, because first of all,
the videos are scary.
Yeah, they are scary. I also don't know if the way that I'm doing it is even correct, because this was 25 years ago that I was doing this. I don't know. Diapers might be different now. Who knows?
The gear is much better.
The gear is different. Exactly. Yeah.
But I'm afraid the techniques are the same.
Okay. Good to know. So we're getting towards the end of the episode here. And one set of questions that I like to ask everybody is about your wins and your struggles that you're going through right now, because I feel like there are some specifics that happen in people's lives that are in the moment that our audience can potentially learn from. So I always like to start with struggles so that we end on a high note. So what are some struggles that you're going through right now that you'd like to share with the community?
Well, again, I've solved most of the struggles. And so I would say that somebody who's just beginning their financial independence journey or just about to make that transition is that the 4% safe withdrawal rate has known failures, and everybody focuses on those failures. And it turns out that you will see those failures coming from months, maybe even years away before it becomes an issue, and you will figure out a way around it. And in today's world, where even though we've quit our jobs, we know we can still earn another dollar or that we can use variable spending, it's easier than ever to make sure that your finances will survive for at least 30 years. And if after the first 10, maybe 15 years of financial independence, you may find that your assets have grown enough to where if you were starting all over again, your actual spending would be less than 4%. And that means you're sustainable for 30, 40, 50, maybe even 60 years. We just don't have enough statistics to guarantee that. The other thing is that we briefly mentioned that every problem in your life that you have during your financial independence years would have been at least 10 times as bad if you were still working, and even worse if you were not financially stable with some financial resilience. And my example of that is being able to spend 6 years caring for my father's finances and being able to handle all the issues. My brother was the guardian, I was the conservator, and it was stressful enough as a financially independent guy with skills. I can only imagine how bad it would have been if I'd been in the military. I don't think I would have been able to be there for him for that. And same for like a medical emergency. I had an appendectomy at age 55, and I knew enough as the pains began to start going to the emergency room next morning because I wasn't going to hang around. I'd already gone to WebMD and had an idea what the problem was. And starting early in the morning with the emergency room gave them the chance to do all the things they need to do to confirm that, yep, it was appendicitis. And so they got me on the operating table during working hours. If I had been working, I would not have been as proactive about going to the emergency room as I was. I probably would have gotten a free ambulance ride after collapsing in a workspace. I also tell people, don't get sucked into just one more year. If you have reached that tripwire, the 4% safe withdrawal rate, you need to start designing your life. You're going to work if it's challenging and fulfilling. You can quit if you hate your boss and you want a better life and more work-life balance. Maybe you want a job switch. Maybe you want a completely different career. Those are all your choices. But do not stay in the workforce for just one more year, for one extra year margin, for just a little bit more margin. And I say this as if it's a matter of life or death, because it is. I have friends who have been working for just one more year to the point where they have actually passed away on the job or not been able to enjoy more than a few months of financial independence. If you never know your last day of anything, and you never know your last day of enjoying your retirement, start as early as you can, start as soon as you can with that 4% safe withdrawal rate. As far as wins go, we've already talked about grandparenting. I'm not going to show anybody pictures, but grandparenting is a lot more fun than parenting. And I will say that to my daughter and my son-in-law every day of the week. But it's fun because we have more parents and more confidence and more support around us now. The other thing that's important about retiring as soon as you can and enjoying your financial independence as soon as you can is that it's easier to do the things you want to do in your 30s, 40s, and 50s if you have the money to do it. And as you get older, there will be dwindling windows of opportunity. And we joke about travel while you still can, but it is getting already more challenging right now as I speak to travel. Things that I would have done in my 30s or 40s, now I'll be very careful as I do them in my 50s and 60s to manage my energy, to give ourselves a recovery day. My bungee jumping days and my high diving free fall days, those are probably over. But we still enjoy traveling, and we still enjoy traveling the world for several months at a time. And the sooner you get started on it, the better you can do it and the more thoroughly you can do it. So do not wait on those. And after that, it's a matter of dialing in your lifestyle to the things you enjoy the most. That's the most winning part about financial independence, is that you get to change the rules every 4 or 5 years and try something different. And at those life transitions, everything's up for negotiation. You and your family can figure out how you want the new way your life is being lived to work out and how you want to do it.
Yeah, that's incredible. I love everything you said. And there's so much there that I wanted to comment on, but I'm going to go to one of the struggles that you talked about,
Okay.
and it's the one more year. And I just wanted to add on to that it's not even just that you might not have one more year because you don't know when your life's going to end, and you don't know when your retirement might end, but it's also that one more year might even be contributing to your life ending earlier, because we know working a lot of the time is very stressful, and stress is not good for you. It's not good for you. And so retiring earlier and not going into the one more year thing could probably extend your life in a very positive way as well. I
Absolutely.
just want to throw that out there because it was something that my mom ran into. I think she could have probably retired a year and a half earlier than she did, but she had the one more year syndrome because she had some stuff that she wanted to do on her house. She needed a new car, stuff like that, blah, blah, blah. And it worked out for her because she's still healthy and everything. But I'm like, that's 1 year that you gave up. And now she's like, man, I wish I would have retired earlier because I love it.
Yep.
And so, yeah, I would say that I hope I don't run into that. I only have about $160,000 invested. My net worth is higher than that because we've got property, but my actual liquid assets are 160. And to me, I feel very behind because at 37 and being in this community, there's people who's like, I have $1 million. And I'm like, oh, I don't. And now I'm not counting my partners. So he has a little bit more than I do. So together we're better. But when I look at that, if I have a day where I struggle at work, I'll be like, what's the 4% rule for $160,000? Could I live on that? Is that possible? I really do that.
How much longer do I have to save? How much more do I have to save? And when will I reach that point? And put on your calendar. Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
but it is very funny. I'm like, can I live on $20 a month? Me? No. Anyway, but obviously no. But I probably won't succumb to the one more year thing. Okay, before you leave, we have to get your life hack recommendation or learning. I know you've given us a lot so far, but is there anything else that you want to share as a hack, a recommendation, learning that you have that the community needs to know and needs to do?
The biggest issue is frugality versus deprivation. If you're in frugality, saving for financial independence, you're naturally going to strive for as high a savings rate and a high investment rate as you can. And so frugality still feels challenging and fulfilling. If you're feeling burned out, deprived, miserable, isolated, those are all feelings that it's time to back off of the savings rate a little bit and go achieve a little more work-life balance with the things you enjoy doing. Don't go out and spend money for the sake of blowing money. Go out and spend money on the things that you value and do a little bit more of that so that you get back to feeling frugal and striving for financial independence. And the easiest way to figure out what you want to spend your money on is to track your spending. And the story is, you show me your checkbook, I'll show you your priorities. And after a few months of tracking your spending, you'll figure out what is important spending for you. And then you're going to iterate on cutting out the waste. And as you track your spending and as you slowly start cutting out the waste, you're going to start having extra money in your checking account every month. And that's the source of your savings rate. That's where you're going to invest from. And as you dial in your lifestyle, as you become more valuable in your career, as you find the kind of career you enjoy doing, it doesn't seem frustrating or deprivation. Instead, it feels challenging and fulfilling, and you can't believe that they're going to pay you this much money to do this job. That's when you're going to ramp up your savings rate. That's when compounding is going to start to make its appearance in your investments. You also will automate as much of this as you can so that you're putting money into investments regularly, once a paycheck, once a month, whatever the periodicity is. The more you get automated, the less you have to think about it. And it all starts with tracking your spending and cutting out the waste, feeling that frugality as you're approaching your financial independence. After that, if you feel bored, not deprived, but bored, that means it's working. That means you've cut out the waste. That means you're saving and investing. That means you've probably put it in autopilot so you don't even have to think about it. And now you've got to find something else to do with your life because you've got yourself on track for your financial independence, whether that's 8 years, 10 years, 15 years, you're on track for that. And now you can figure out what else you want to do with your life. Maybe that's just doing better at work or finding a better job. Maybe it's achieving a better work-life balance. Maybe it's a job change.
Yeah, that's great advice. And do you have any recommendations on how to track your spending? Do you have any apps or programs that you use?
Anything. The thing that you are likely to use every day to track your spending. If you're waiting until the end of the month to track your spending, you haven't found the right system yet. It's whatever does it for you that moment, that day, and that you don't have to think about. Now, for some people, it's going to be as simple as signing up for an Empower account, linking your credit cards to the Empower account, letting Empower track your spending for you. But you also will maybe want more tools to analyze your spending and set budgets. And so there's other software for that. Things like Quicken or You Need a Budget or anything that your phone is likely to support you using on your phone that makes it easy for you to do some budgeting and tell when you're about to blow through your budget or when you need to move money around to support your spending. Even pencil and paper will do it. I know plenty of people that do it with old-fashioned Excel.
Yeah, I use a combination of, so I'm one of the people who's actually very sad that Mint did away with their budget.
Right.
I used it for years. And so they had a
Right.
bunch of my data, and like it was really cool to see like they would do an end of year spending. And now they moved me over to their Credit Karma app that they've got, and they do have a very basic budgeting in there, which is fine. That's fine. And so I've started using that and a spreadsheet. And the reason why I do the spreadsheet is because I want to see averages of each month, totals for each month, and then totals and averages for the year. So like I have each month listed, and then an average column, and then a yearly average column, and then a yearly total column. And I'm doing that for not only my spending and expenses, but also my savings, my investments, and my income.
Good.
And it just shows me, what am I really doing when it comes to an entire year? Because I feel like month to month, things change. You have, for example, this month, I renewed my passport, my driver's license, and I have my registration for my car coming up. Those are one-time expenses that happen. The passport's once every 10 years or 15 years, whatever
right.
it is. Yeah. And even the driver's license is once every decade. So adding that in and seeing it over a year is better for me when I'm calculating my 25 times whatever I'm spending, rather than looking at it monthly, because your monthly really doesn't show you what you should.
The point is, you will know when you cross that line to financial independence, and you will not have to worry about just one warrior syndrome.
Yep. Yeah. I'm not worried about me. I already wish I could quit my job. If anybody at work is listening right now, I'm sorry. My boss's boss actually knows about this podcast and is cheering me on. When are you going to quit your job? So I'm actually in a really good spot.
Support.
Yeah, got a lot of support. Well, this was really fun. I enjoyed talking with you and meeting you, and I hope we can see each other like at one of the campfires or something. I know you live way out in Hawaii, and I'm way over here in North Carolina, which is like the opposite sides of the world. But if anybody else wants to know you better, get in touch with you, maybe get one of your books, how can they reach out to you?
Well, again, everything's in the library. Start there. My website is militaryfinancialindependence.com. That's all run together. militaryfinancialindependence.com. And my email address, send me an email. It's all over the internet. It's nords@gmail.com. That's the easy way. Of course, you can also contact me through the blog. My Facebook profile is Doug Nordman, and that's totally public. Everything that's on that Facebook account is meant to be public, so stock away. Enjoy the travel albums, enjoy the grandparenting pictures. It's all there for people to look at and visualize what they are going to do for their financial independence based on what I'm doing now. I'm also on forums like Bogleheads, Mr. Money Mustache. A lot of my writing is on the Military Wallet and also on esimoney.com, that site that has the Millionaire Money Mentors on it.
Awesome. Yeah. I'll put all of that in the show notes, of course, and any links to your books, I'll put them in there as well, so people can reach out. Thanks for coming on, Doug, and it was great to meet you.
All right, Megan.
Thanks for listening to the EverydayFI podcast. If you're loving the show, here are some things you can do. Number 1, subscribe in your favorite podcast player and share the show with your friends and family. Number 2, please leave a review. I'm always looking for ways to improve the show. Number 3, check out my website, EverydayFI.com, where you can listen to all the episodes and leave comments for myself and the guest. Number 4, if you're interested in sharing your own financial independence story, you can find a submission form at everyday-fi.com/podcast. And finally, number 5, join my Patreon membership for only $5 a month at patreon.com/everydayfi podcast. This is a one-woman show, so every little bit counts. See you next time as we continue to go down the path to financial freedom.